Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to, depending on wherever you may live or however you decide to look at your clock, this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we?
Today's first encounter. I live in Oxfordshire in England, and when I was growing up, we had a garden with chickens in it. They'd walk about in the garden during the day, then at night we'd lock them away in a big hut or pen at the far end of the garden. My bedroom window faced the back garden, and even at night I could sit on my bed and see all the way down to the end where the chicken hut was. I've had terrible insomnia my whole life, so would sometimes spend nights as a kid looking at the stars or trying to see if I could see the chickens. When I was about 12, I had a typical night of not being able to sleep and sat up in bed looking out the window. When I looked out, next to the chicken hut was a tall black figure. It looked sort of human, but similar height to the hut, which was about 10 feet, with arms at its side that just sort of ended in stumps at the wrist with no hands. It had no clothes on from what I could tell. It just stood there still. I couldn't make out a face, so I couldn't tell if it was looking at me or if it was looking around. I was so terrified, so I curled up on the bed, sort of petrified. I think after a while I built up the courage to turn my light on and look outside, but it was gone. I think I eventually dropped off to sleep. The next morning, I woke up my dad, breaking the sad news that one of our chickens had been killed during the night. He said a fox had gotten to it. I went down to the garden and saw that on the side where I had seen the creature standing, the mesh had been torn off, and inside the pen there were feathers everywhere. And the 5 remaining chickens, that from memory, seemed scared. I then explained to my dad what I had seen that night, and that a creature had done this. But my dad reassured me that it was a fox, as this was the second chicken to have been killed this way. He said I must have had a nightmare, and that was that. I slept even worse than usual for a long time. Then life went on, and as I got older, I just assumed that what I had seen was a dream, or my still young imagination. That was until I was about 20, and at this point I was halfway through my second year at university, and I had come home for the Christmas holidays. My parents still kept chickens, and we had about 10 now in a new hut that was supposedly fox-proof. My dad had built it after the chicken death I had previously described, and we hadn't had any so-called foxes kill chickens since. So I'm home from uni. My desk was now at the window where my bed used to be. A few nights before I was due to start back at uni again, I was at my desk, just on my laptop, playing games and watching stuff. I took a moment just to look out of the window when my heart absolutely dropped. It genuinely felt like it had stopped and every hair on my body had stood up on end. Down at the end of the garden, next to the chicken hut, stood the same exact creature in the same exact way I had remembered seeing it when I was 12. It was just standing still. I think I watched it in horror for about a minute or so, and it didn't move at all. I eventually stood up and left my room. It was late, but I could hear my parents. Watching TV in their bedroom, I went in very panicked and said there's something outside by the chickens. My dad got up and went downstairs to go outside and take a look. I followed him. He grabbed a torch and we walked down to the garden. I could see as soon as he opened the door to the garden that whatever it was wasn't there anymore. But as we approached the chicken hut, we could see that again on the side where the creature was standing, the mesh was completely ripped off and there were feathers everywhere. My dad started swearing and asked me if I had seen a fox. I said I guess so, even though this time I knew full well what I had seen. I wasn't going to tell my dad that as he wouldn't believe me. Again, this time, just the one chicken was gone or killed. After that, I had finished university the following year and moved out as soon as I could. I'm now 29 and live a few miles away with my wife. She's the only person I actually told, and she seems to believe me. I know it happened, and it still affects me to this day, and I don't really know what to do with my experience. My dad called me last year to tell me a fox had gotten another chicken. This was the first time it had happened since I had left home, and even though I don't live there anymore, the news still absolutely terrified me. The wood devil, or stick breakers of New Hampshire. A Bigfoot-like creature that has been noted throughout New Hampshire, maybe a humanoid of unknown origin. During the spring of 2003, I was visiting my sister who lives in Hampstead, New Hampshire. She lives in a somewhat wooded subdivision. It was early spring in New England, and the weather had been fairly rainy. I would quite frequently go outside by myself to smoke cigarettes at night on the porch after midnight. While I was outside, I would hear large sticks crack and break on the forest floor near where I was sitting, but no leaves rustling. At first, I really didn't think much of it. I'm a seasoned camper and just don't think it was a big deal. I figured it was some kind of animal. This happened night after night. Then I noticed the sounds of something dropping out of the trees and an animal or being of some kind scraping on the bark a bit as it descended. The wood devil, or stick breakers of New Hampshire. A Bigfoot-like creature that has been noted throughout New Hampshire, maybe a humanoid of unknown origin. During the spring of 2003, I was visiting my sister who lives in Hampstead, New Hampshire. She lives in a somewhat wooded subdivision. It was early spring in New England, and the weather had been fairly rainy. I would quite frequently go outside by myself to smoke cigarettes at night on the porch after midnight. While I was outside, I would hear large sticks crack and break on the forest floor near where I was sitting, but no leaves rustling. At first, I really didn't think much of it. I'm a seasoned camper and just don't think it was a big deal. I figured it was some kind of animal. This happened night after night. Then I noticed the sounds of something dropping out of the trees and an animal or being of some kind scraping on the bark a bit as it descended. I tried looking for movement but saw nothing, like an animal or anything. The floodlights were on every time I was out there, and they were brightly shining. There was a streetlight at the end of a long paved driveway off in the distance. On subsequent nights, I took a flashlight and tried to shine whatever animal it might be, but with no avail. Even though everything was brightly lit, I saw nothing at all. I tried this night after night. The sounds were there every single night without fail. I could hear them moving closer and closer to me the longer I was out there. During the day, I looked for tracks and marks on trees or other evidence, but turned up nothing. I picked up sticks and broke a few to see the size of the stick I was hearing, and ascertained the stick diameter was about an inch. I had my 11-year-old nephew go out into the woods and start jumping on sticks to see if he could break some, so I could check the way it sounds from where I was sitting, trying to judge the distance. He jumped on some, but because they were kind of moist, he could only break the smaller ones. He weighed only about 75-80 pounds. This told me that whatever it was weighed a lot more than that. I could break the bigger ones by jumping on them, but I weigh 150 pounds. There are no animals in the area that are really large and could break the size of stick based on the tests I did. Whatever it was would move in close to me, so I used my nephew to run around and make similar noises to gauge the distance in the daylight, when they were their closest. They were about 20 to 30 feet from me at best. I know there was more than one of them because I could hear one back beside the house and another one was in front at the end of the driveway. They moved in very close to where I was, and I could hear them coming from two different directions. They were not visible with the naked eye at all. I tried to get some digital photos, but saw nothing discernible in the pictures. Another thing that happened, my sister didn't have any window coverings downstairs. She loved the view of the trees. And I would sit at night on her computer surfing the web and chatting online. Near the windows, I frequently would get the feeling that something or someone was watching me. I wrote it off as just my imagination. Then there was the issue of the dogs barking and howling every night really late, like they were hearing something. They were kept in their crates in the basement at night. They would start their howling and wouldn't stop unless someone would go down and make them stop. They also would look out the windows late in the evening and start barking out behind the house, as though something was there. We all thought it was just another animal or whatever and wrote it off. My brother-in-law decided to keep the dogs upstairs with him at night, just to keep them quiet. I was outside one night very late after midnight alone. I was on her porch near the door. I heard them coming again. The floodlights were on, and I could see well into the trees because there were no smaller brush in the way. I saw nothing, but I still heard them. No rustling, only sticks breaking. My sister had a few planters with flowers in them on the lower landing from where I was standing. It was in the really bright light from the floodlights and only about 8 to 10 feet from me. Some of the flowers in the planter draped over the side and hung away from the planters. As I stood there, I watched the plants move to one side and then flop back as though something had just brushed past them. Only nothing was there that I could see at all. There was no other sounds, like footsteps or grinding pebble or grit, no wind at all. When the flowers swung, and they moved a lot, not just a little, whatever it was would have come up the stairs to get me. I stood there shocked, sort of running over what I had just seen in my mind briefly, and got freaked out completely. I went inside quickly and locked the door. Everyone else was asleep in the house. I looked out the side window, but I saw nothing. Another late evening, I was on the computer, and I got the feeling of being watched again. I looked into the living room from where I was sitting and thought I saw shadows on the ceiling as though someone had walked past the lamps in there. I thought I must be just really tired and told myself it was my imagination. I decided to take a hot shower to relax before bed. The bathroom door is right across from the basement door. The basement door was closed when I went into the shower, and everyone was in bed asleep upstairs with the lights off. When I came out of the shower, the basement door was open, and I just closed it, thinking it was a big strange, no big deal. When I went to go upstairs, I saw my 11-year-old nephew's bedroom light was on and got scared. I went up the stairs, and he was in bed, dead asleep, but the light was on really bright. I became afraid for the kids and went and woke up my brother-in-law, but he blew me off and went back to sleep. Just then, my niece woke up to let her dog out to go to the bathroom, so I asked her to sit up with me for a while. Thank God she was there to sit up and keep me company for a little bit. What I am saying here is I believe these things are coming into the house sometime, and that's why the dogs barked and howled like they did. I'm not sure how they got in, maybe through the walls, maybe through the basement outside door, I don't know. But I feel like they were coming in. What are these things? Aliens? Dimensional entities? Were they just watching us? Were they abducting, testing, or even hunting? I have no idea, and it's frightening. If you think about it, you realize that on the grass there is no sticks to break, so they are quiet and silent, and they were right next to the house. How many other houses do they go into? The story goes on a little bit further. My sister later divorced and started dating again. Her new boyfriend and I were talking on the phone one evening recently, and the subject turned paranormal. I knew he was an avid New Hampshire hunter, so I asked him if he had ever heard anything like this. He said, yeah. He said that once, in November of 2003, he and 5 of his friends were out hunting on White Mountain one year, and all of them were, of course, armed. They had set up camp for the night and had made a fire. As they were all sitting around after midnight, getting settled for the evening, they started hearing the stick breakers, breaking sticks all around them, but not rustling leaves at all. They didn't see anything and couldn't figure out what it was. They did try to shine their flashlights and see what it was, but they couldn't see anything. All 5 got spooked and decided to turn in for the night, and when morning came, they decided to move their camp further up the mountain, closer to where they knew a larger group was set up. They all decided not to talk about it, the event, after that day, and they decided to never go back there either. I was so glad to hear that someone else had experienced the stick breakers. Now, at least, I know I'm not nuts. I know there are others out there who have had these similar experiences. I feel that this needs to be brought to the public's attention and put on record. Today's third and final part of the upload is something really interesting I stumbled across and wanted to share it with you guys. Mystery has a 10-foot creature darker than the night spotted roaming near Humberside Airport. A man claims the beast ran across the road near Humberside Airport. He claims he saw a 10-foot creature that was darker than the night run across the A18 near Humberside Airport. He's encouraged others to come forward with their spooky sightings. Lee Soloway, who runs the Realm of Supernatural podcast with co-host Fitchy McFitch, said they would be discussing some of the area's most infamous cases at the Research and Witness Convention 2020 at Prince Quay Shopping Center. The convention will run between Friday, February 28th and Sunday, March 1st. Lee states they will be discussing the strange sightings from across the region, including Hall's infamous Old Stinker and other tales from across the region. We want to see if there's other witnesses who will come forward. He said the black mass about 10 feet tall had recently been seen crossing the A18 near Humberside Airport, first by an elderly couple and then by his co-host Fitchy. He thought it was a ghost at first. He could see it had a humanoid form, but it was darker than night, and it just moved across the road. We went back the next day, and there was a hole in the bottom of a hedgerow, so something could have crossed there. Soon after, co-host Fitchy also found and photographed 2 deer leg in the middle of the road nearby. I just think that's a little bit strange, Lee says. The picture quality isn't great, as it was taken from inside of a car, because he was a bit creeped out. You tell people about it, and they say, oh, it's just poachers. And yeah, it does go on, but why would a poacher just stop on the A18 to butcher a deer carcass? The Old Stinker is a famous tale of Hull and East Yorkshire folklore. A half-man, half-dog creature, mostly seen stalking the area around Bromston Drain, near Beverley. It was reportedly seen eating a dog before being spooked by onlookers and jumping over an 8-foot fence with the dog still in its mouth. But that is far from the only strange sighting reported in the region. South of the river, there's been quite a few sightings of a half-deer, half-man creature very similar to the puka in Celtic folklore, Lee says. You also get Bigfoot sightings that run up and down the A15. He said he and his co-host started the podcast after having different encounters with shadow men and UFOs. We listened to other podcasts by people who hadn't had experiences, so we just did it, he states. The podcast is available on streaming sites including iTunes and Spotify, and each episode gets 1,000 of hits, often heard by listeners as far as US to Australia. He said his opinions on the supernatural are often met with skepticism, but he still believes there are more people out there yet to share their experiences. One of my mates was talking about this Dogman sighting, and this guy suddenly got interested, he said. He normally just laughs this sort of stuff off, this guy who's in his 70s, but he asked what we were talking about, and we told him, and he said, well, that's the thing I ran over those years ago. He said it had been a foggy morning, driving his Mini, and he hit something crossing the road, and it spun the Mini 360 degrees. He saw an animal lying there, and it sprung up and turned around with yellow eyes and the hind legs of a dog. It bounded off. He'd carried that with him for 30 years, so there are people out there. He's now asking others to come forward and share their experiences, anonymously if needed be, for them to discuss at the upcoming convention. I expect people to be doubtful. We used to have acceptance of this thing in the past, but with technology and the rest of it, we've moved away from the spiritual side, but people do run into it now and again. Like many people, will get that feeling of being watched and things like that. We do have the ability to believe these things, we just don't use it.
Well, there you have it, folks. This early morning or middle of the night bonus upload. I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd really like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps the channel growing and going, and honestly, what gives people a chance and a place to share their experiences and theories judgment-free, just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, our family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the answers, and God bless.